Welcome to Reader Meet Writer Southern Edition featuring Ruby McConnell with her new book, Ground Truth. We hope to provide some retail therapy, entertainment, and distraction during this hour. I'm Wanda with the Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance. Ruby McConnell's newest book, Ground Truth, A Geological Survey of a Life, was released by Overcup Press in April 2020. Ruby is a registered geologist and outdoor adventurer who writes about nature, art, and culture, with a particular emphasis on the intersection of the environment and human experience. A recipient of numerous honors, including the Literary Arts Oregon Literary Fellowship, McConnell has written extensively about the Pacific Northwest and the environment in scientific and literary journals. She is the author of two previous titles, A Girl's Guide to the Wild and A Woman's Guide to the Wild, and lives in Oregon with her husband, Paul. Welcome, Ruby. We're so glad you're here. Can you tell us how you are and tell us about your book?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Nice to see everyone. I want to open today by acknowledging that we are holding this space together in a really trying and difficult moment of history, and the contours of which we have not yet seen play out. And I'm grateful that everyone is still here supporting organizations like the Independent Booksellers Association and small bookstores and independently owned bookstores. And in my case, an author that's working with an independent micro press in Oregon. I think that these are important organizations that play pivotal roles in moments like this when we are in desperate need of essential education centers, community centers, arts centers, and support. So I know that everyone who is hosting this, the booksellers and the Independent Booksellers Association, are holding the space for this moment and are also a great bastion of resources for independently owned booksellers that are also owned by people of color. And I encourage you today to spend your money in direction of those voices rather than white voices such as my own. I am humbled to be taking up any space on today's wavelengths today. So today I'm in Eugene, Oregon. This is my home. I don't always show this to people at book events, but I'm showing it to you because I'm here to talk about the environment, and our environment is different. This is a unique and wonderful opportunity for me to reach out to an audience in a different geography and share my Pacific Northwest lens on the environment, which includes a deep message of solidarity and the recognition that the kind of change that I feel is necessary and call for in my work also needs to progress through a social justice lens before we can make any progress. So that's the spirit in which I'm progressing today, and I know that everyone who is here joins me in that, and so I appreciate that. My work is as an environmental writer. I'm a geologist by trade. I worked in volcanology as a young geologist and then moved into what they call environmental and investigative geology. So my background is in toxics and environmental cleanup. I was a wetlands scientist, and I worked with various groups like Greenpeace in my very, very youth, farther along behind us than we might like to admit, and progressed sort of through many stages of my thinking and activism with the environment, and have arrived in Ground Truth. This is the obligatory, I'm going to hold up the copy of my book, Ground Truth. I'm a very well-trained author with an independent press, so they coach us to do that. with ground truth, I'm stepping into what I define as what I call post-millennial environmentalism, which in my definition is rooted in science and storytelling. And I think that that's an essential shift from what we had in the 20th century, where we really focused on conservation of particular place and protection of individual issues and species. And I think that as we move farther into the millennium, we get into a place where we need personal story and engagement of the hearts and minds of people in order to create action. I think that this is a doubly interesting time to be having these kinds of discussions. For the past several weeks leading up to this, the focus has been on what environmental philosophy and environmental science communication can help us understand about the pandemic and about coronavirus. So I think that an environmental lens is a useful lens, and a geologic environmental lens is a useful lens for this time on a couple of different levels. So while ground truth centers on my experience in the Pacific Northwest, and the Pacific Northwest as a region, I think it's important that we understand that these problems are universal and they're shared, and they manifest in different ways in different landscapes. So environmental thought and environmental policy and environmental thinking necessarily has to be very different from one region to another. But today, what I'd like to share with you is one of the essays that deals with the ocean. And I chose that because I know that most of the southern states have a coastline. And I think that the ocean is a really wonderful uniting feature in our world that we all have history and experience with. So I hope it resonates with you, and I hope it also speaks to some extent to this moment that we are sharing today. So, what the ocean takes. The ocean is a treacherous wonder. On February 5th, 2011, Jack Harnsoncram and Connor Osland, two young men from Eugene, Oregon, drowned when a nearly waist-high sneaker wave swept them off a rock bridge into the narrow chasm 100 meters north of here. The force of the freezing, churning water and the shape of the rocks made it impossible for Jack and Connor to climb to safety, and equally impossible for their four friends to save them without losing their own lives. Jack and Connor died within 3 minutes. Coastal safety marker, Yachats, Oregon. Yachats has been occupied by people for at least 1,000 years, though little of its history remains. For centuries before the arrival of Lewis and Clark, Native American tribes lived in the coastal forest as hunter-gatherers, migrating to the ocean from inland valleys seasonally, marrying their lives to the rhythms of the natural world. They called the area Yahakt, dark water at the foot of the mountain, and lived there in concert with the sea, in low pit houses built directly into the rocks at the water's edge. When the first white settlers arrived at the Willamette Valley, they took the land and its resources by force, marching the peaceful tribes north and west to the ocean near Yachats. Those that didn't die of starvation, exposure, or exhaustion along the way were lost to disease or forced into internment camps. Many tried to escape and were plunged to their deaths in the icy waters, or were beaten and buried alongside hundreds of others in mass graves along what is now Highway 101. Entire tribes were lost this way, along with any proof of their existence. Most prehistoric sites in the area have been destroyed by construction, vandals, and the persistent work of water on the land. What the ocean hasn't taken, it has buried. The remaining sites have been slowly swallowed by the water's interminable rise. In recent years, Yachats has cast itself as a coastal destination. There are bed and breakfasts and oceanside hotels and restaurants from which you can watch families make their way along the network of public hiking trails that hug the shoreline, beckoning visitors to the water. It's a place of easy leisure as the rocks call to beachgoers with tide pools filled with green-brown anemones, cone-capped limpets, and deep purple starfish. And the ocean offers up spectacular displays of surf and spray. The beauty of the landscape and the constant change in light through the clouds and against the water encourage a kind of mindful thoughtlessness, an easy disregard of our immediate surroundings that puts us into needless danger. This ocean, the locals will tell you, takes children like stones. Unlike the disappearance of the Native Americans, which was barely acknowledged by white people for over 100 years until the 2009 dedication of Amanda's Trail, named for a blind Native American woman who suffered greatly in the marches, the news of Jack and Connor traveled inland fast. I hadn't known the boys, but I did know Jack's mother, Sarah. We took dance together, and for a time, she was a predictable feature in my life. She was an elegant and joyful dancer, and though I never saw her outside the studio, she was a kind of friend. The Monday after the ocean took Jack and Connor, Sarah came back to class to dance with us for a tenuous 2 hours. She seemed glad to be there, following the rise and fall of the drummers across the floor, but after that day, she never came to dance with us again, her absence leaving a great black hole in the space between us. Waves are the ocean's foot soldiers. They form as nearly constant winds sweep across the water, rolling it in great circles. As the sea shallows towards the land, the base of each wave finds purchase on the ocean floor and is slowed by friction. The top of the roll continues unencumbered, outpacing its base and rising in a cresting wave in a process called standing up. In Oregon, the water is deep and there are few obstructions to slow incoming water as it approaches the particularly steep continental shelf. Waves stand up quickly in these waters. After 2 years of dancing without Sarah, I stumbled upon a video about the installation of a coastal safety marker where Jack and Connor had drowned. The video talks about beach safety, telling their story and showing a scene from the dedication of the marker in which Sarah reads while a Native American woman plays the flute. Later, they film her as she stands facing the ocean, her grief like the surf, standing up quickly, as she watches the water pass under and over the narrow stone bridge from which the boys were swept. She looks into the ocean, her small, pale hands framing her face as she works to tuck lost strands behind her ears. I grieve too to look at her. It's painful to see how deeply she's contemplated the scene. She begins to talk about the ocean, the rhythm of the waves, their irregular and syncopated beat, and about the missed warning signs of the water's danger. She points out how the rocks are covered in barnacles, indicating they spend time submerged beneath the water, how frequently a larger wave will wash across the bridge, disappearing it entirely, how they might have known. The video shows a class picture taken an hour before Jack and Connor were swept away. In it, they stand with their classmates, shoulder to shoulder, wide grins across their faces. Of the group, only Jack and Connor have their arms raised, uplifted to the sky, as if they might have known. The scene cuts back to Sarah, who is forgiving the ocean. I still like it here, she says. I come and listen. It's not just the water that needs forgiveness. The rocks are also partly to blame. The very cliffs and crags that make the coastline beautiful have proven treacherous and for centuries have taken the lives of those who choose to test the waters. But it is the conspiracy of the water with the rocks that is the most dangerous. The more complicated the shape of the rock outcrops, the more unpredictable the surf becomes. As water bounces against the rocks, the energy of the incoming waves is reflected and refracted, the troughs of some waves canceling out the crests of others, while still others combine, creating waves of unusual size and force. Sneaker waves. Sneaker waves are thieves and thugs. The force of even a small sneaker wave is enough to lift you from your feet. The backwash from sneaker waves is just as powerful as the swash. Not only do they knock you down, they drag you back out with them. Oregon's Pacific waters are characterized by these waves. Between the years 2000 and 2013, 25 people lost their lives to sneaker waves on the Oregon coast, and at least 26 were swept into the ocean but managed to survive. It seems to be as easy to be taken as it is to be left behind. I go to Yachats often and sit and watch the people venture out onto the rocks. I listen to the uneven rhythm of the water, think about Jack and Connor, and read the prominent stainless steel and stone safety marker that tells their story and the warning that follows it. There are a few such markers on the Oregon coast, so it is unusual that just 4 years earlier, a quieter marker was dedicated, deep along the woods in the Amanda's Trail. It was a simple carved statue of a Native American woman grown over with moss, meant to remind us of the historical truth of the place and the lives that were lost to coastal forces entirely within our control. The ocean, though, is indifferent and beyond our control. The dark waters of Yachats are especially so. They take houses, lives, lovers, and old couples equally, regardless of heritage or skin color. They have swallowed history, erased culture, and buried secrets, and they continue to do so. On December 18th, 2015, storms washed the bridge to the Amanda's Trail and the statue into the sea. Now it's up to us to preserve the buried secrets of our past. Respect the immense power of the ocean, know the tide level, face the ocean at all times, enjoy the beauty of the coast safely, speak up to others who may be in danger, and to those taking risks along the shore, listen. Coastal Safety Marker, Yachats, Oregon. And I think that the message of the safety marker is the message for us today. So again, speak up to others who may be in danger and to those taking risks along the shore, and listen. And I feel like if there's anything that we have learned in this moment, is that speaking up in this moment is where our safety lies. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor to people who have thoughts or feelings or questions. And I'm interested to hear what people have to say and share.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful reading and so pertinent. And it is time for questions. It's important you stay muted so we can all hear. In the chat option, please begin all questions with a capital Q so Linda Marie can find them. She'll also give your store a shout out when she asks the question if you give us the name of your local independent. Linda Marie, do we have a question for Ruby?
Yes. What inspired you to write this book? Was there a certain moment or experience?
That's a great question and a story that I like to tell, so I'm glad you asked that. I was not a writer when I started writing Ground Truth. I was barely working on A Woman's Guide to the Wild, which is prescriptive how not to pee on your shoes, which everyone needs to know how not to pee on their shoes. But that was not what this is. And I was stuck in a waiting room, and I was reading my own alumni magazine because I went to the University of Oregon, and it was this amazing magazine at that time, and they had a contest called Northwest Perspectives. And I read those essays, and they resonated with me because they were talking about the place, we're talking about the way that their lives were knitted to the land. And I thought, my life is knitted to the land. And so I wrote an essay about salmon and my father for the next year's essay contest and won 3rd place. And it kickstarted most of my writing career at that point. Yeah.
How did you connect with your publisher?
That's another great story. I am the person who breaks all of the rules of publishing ever. I met my publisher on Twitter. I am unagented. Well, let me say first, my other books are published through Sasquatch Books, they've kind of outgrown an indie bookseller. but they were an indie bookseller, I mean, indie publisher when they found me. And they pulled my first book out of the slush pile because I submitted it unagented. And then I published 3 books with them, and I moved on to Overcup, and I found them on Twitter. They put out a call for submissions and found them that way. Amazing.
A fan of Copperfish Books in Punta Gorda, Florida asks, how do you not pee on your shoes?
Okay, I'm just gonna do this. You've asked the right person. Okay, you take a wide-legged stance and you point your backside down the hill, and then you squat as low as you can. It's downhill, and if you need to, you hold on to a tree. And then the other thing is that you stop caring that you've peed on your shoes. That's essential too.
Another viewer is interested in your geology career. How you had mentioned that you were a geologist, so I think they're curious about that.
Right. So, sure. I was studying general science and environmental studies at the university, and I had this incredible graduate student sub for a class at short notice, and it was like some geology class, and I can't even remember the class, but I remember her. And she came in and told the story of how she became a PhD candidate in geology, and she had been a welder. I mean, she's like this really like wild looking woman. She'd been working as a welder and doing all, and she came from like this really, really poor background. She was like, and I got so interested in these hot materials, and I had so many questions. I kept asking questions, and I still have questions, and I'm at the level of a PhD, and I'm not going to stop until I've satisfied my questions. And she said, if you're a woman in science, you need to do research. Your voice is necessary, and I will help you get there. And so I went to her, and she got me a research position with a fabulous female champion, a female professor and a champion of female students. And I studied Mount St. Helens for several years through graduate school. And then got out of graduate school and discovered that there are not a lot of jobs in active volcanoes. And pivoted into working in environmental contamination until I was the last person to get laid off in the last economic crisis because I was getting paid many less dollars than my male counterparts, but had more certifications. And then I bailed.
Fascinating. Good stuff.
A fan of Quail Ridge Books in Raleigh, North Carolina asks, what do you think would be an effective way to teach preschoolers and elementary children about our responsibility to the environment? And what children's books would be useful?
I love that question. Take them outside. Send them outside and encourage curiosity, and encourage them to get dirty, and encourage them to build memories connected to the outside. If all of your memories and all of your life experiences involve urban settings and built settings and human-based settings, then you lack a connection and therefore an empathy to the natural world. If we tie the natural world to important experiences in our lives and to important emotions, we're much more likely to take action. In terms of books for young children, gosh, I mean, I go back even to like the Caterpillar book. What's the Caterpillar book? Remember The Hungry Caterpillar?
Yeah, that's it.
Right, okay. Those books, I mean, my mind sort of travels more, well, The Wind in the Willows. I also really like Frog and Toad has some lovely things. You know, for those really small kids, but I think that for the small kids, the most important thing is letting them touch. I think we forget, we're worried that they'll get dirty or they'll hurt themselves, but I think that it's okay to let them touch when they're outside.
A fan of Antigone Books in Tucson, Arizona asks, How do you balance your geological career and your writing career? And do you ever censor your writing to protect your other career?
First of all, shout out to Tucson. I did my graduate work at Northern Arizona University. So I love myself some desert country. I don't balance geology and writing anymore. I am not a working geologist. I retain my professional certifications so that I can be a certified, active, legitimate, stamped, unaffiliated public academic. And that is totally freeing. And so it gives, I am not beholden to anyone besides myself and my publishers. And it allows me a freedom that other scientists don't have. And it's what lets me do the deep kind of environmental advocacy work and social justice advocacy work that I find is important to me, because really, I think it's very challenging for scientists to, I don't think it's challenging for them to maintain their perspective and their objectivity. I think it's challenging for them to navigate the disparate value systems of the institutions that they work for and that fund their research.
Are you working on a new writing project?
I am working on a new writing project. So I have stepped away from the Woman's Guide franchise and feel satisfied with that. And I'm writing working on another book, tentatively called Wilderness in the American Spirit, Mapping the Route to Post-Millennial Environmentalism, blah, which I don't think is really gonna be a selling title, but that's what I'm calling it. That's what you have to hand to the publishers so they know what you're gonna do. And really what it is I'm retelling the history of the Applegate Trail, which is the southern route of the Oregon Trail. And everyone's like, the Applegate Trail. I'm like, I know, you say that, or even Oregonians are like, the Applegate Trail. Super important in the gold rush. It was the trail that sort of, you either went south to gold or north to trees. And I'm using 1800s history to current day history and the events along the Applegate Trail as a large-scale metaphor for the changing relationship, American relationship to the natural world. So in that book, I'm looking at the definition of spirit is used in a lot of different ways, everything from American spirit to the breath of the planet, to the history of the role of religion along the Applegate Trail and in the United States. And what I'm looking at in that is that notion of radical self-care, radical community building, and radical social justice being an important part, and in fact, probably the essential component of effective environmental change and sustainability moving forward. There's a lot of storytelling and some environmental philosophy and some good map analogies as we go.
A bookseller from Malaprop's Bookstore Cafe in Asheville wants to hear a little bit more about that. She asks, can you say more about your social justice work and the importance of this in environmentalist circles?
So historically, the environmental movement in the United States has been pretty abysmal in terms of inclusivity, in terms of recognizing that social justice and environmental justice issues are important and necessary. It's been pretty bad at funding these initiatives. It's been pretty dominated by progressive white moneyed liberals. And that hasn't been effective in terms of creating sustaining change. We've seen better success from farm worker movements and other social justice. In fact, inner city movements have done a lot of better progress in terms of changing people's behavior into a sustainable direction. So I think that the importance, first of all and foremost, is that we have to kind of fix the broken environmental movement system before you can start to have that environmental movement then affect change in the greater world, which is really messy, and I think hopefully accelerated after these recent events. I think that one of the things that people need to understand is that geographically, throughout the history of the United States in particular, because we have a history of constant settlement as we expanded west, and rapid development, our communities formed really quickly, and they formed in reflection of the stratified nature of our society. So geographically, communities of color and minority communities are located in what was considered less desirable locations. And that physical geography is in fact a social injustice. There's a reason, you know, people joke about like, oh, it's always a trailer park that gets hit by the tornado. There's a reason for that. And that's, you know, there's a reason that these communities are hit disproportionately by floods. There's also a reason that these communities have problems in flare up in cancers and all of these systemic diseases due to contamination sites. Where I am in Eugene, Oregon, Oregon had exclusionary laws for a very long time, and the city of Eugene did not allow people of color to live in Eugene for a very long time. And there are still pockets of my city that don't have utilities running to them because they are historical neighborhoods where people of color resided. And it's infrastructural, geographical, geological, systemic injustice that we haven't bothered to fix even as we've developed around those neighborhoods. So to think that there can be a separation between those, I think was really short-sighted of the environmental movement, and I think that that's being rapidly corrected, hopefully.
Has been your biggest challenge being a woman in science?
Not having gloves that fit my hands. No, I mean, yes, like in boots on the ground, seriously, not having equipment that fit me was like, in terms of just getting my job done, not in terms of psychology or emotional or like, you know, being able to live or getting paid less, just in terms of like going out and digging the same hole in the same amount of time as my male counterparts. I didn't have equipment that fit me. I felt for those women astronauts that didn't get to do their spacewalk because the suits didn't fit them. I was like, right, because like it never fits you, you know, like, because my hard hat was like all over my head all the time. It was like, it looked like I was 4 years old with this thing. And it was just massive and flipped down. I was like, well, of course I look like an idiot, you know, but I would say, God, you know, to be honest, let me be honest though. I got paid less. I worked in totally male-dominated areas. I got kind of pushed around by, you know, male counterparts and had to scrap for funding. But I also worked with unbelievable female mentors that not only took me to active erupting volcanoes, you know, when you're young and have no money and you get to do those amazing adventure things, but also, you know, grab me and take me to Glorious Steinem. They elevated my work. They published my work. They wrote letters of recommendation. They introduced me to other scientists. I got jobs. I was employed. I did progress in my field. So I think I've done pretty well. I feel like I've done pretty well, and so I feel like I'd rather pass those challenges on and say that I'm not actually in a demographic that had disproportionate challenges. I did have some, but I think I weathered it. I think the bigger challenge for me is how to hold the door open behind me.
Linda Marie, we have time for one more question.
Okay. Who are some of the writers that influence you and or that you're reading now?
Who are some of the readers that influence me? So everyone, let me put a shout out to the work that Michael Pollan has done in terms of crossing boundaries with nature writing and science writing, and doing that early. So just in terms of the kind of work I do, I would also say Rebecca Solnit works in a very similar space. Right now, though, the thing that I'm reading most is Maria Popova's Brain Pickings blog, because she just is such a great curator, and I am sort of cherishing Marge Piercy. And if you don't know Marge Piercy, she's not an environmental writer. She's a science fiction fantasy writer. I don't read science fiction fantasy, totally no judgment, I just don't. But if you have not read Woman on the Edge of Time, that book speaks to this moment so well. And I had a friend of my sister's hand that book to me when I was 15, and it changed my life. And I think that everybody should read it twice.
Thank you.
I'm typing it in here for everyone. Marge Piercy.
Woman on the Edge of Time is amazing.
Thank you so much. I have one question I want to understand about the sneaker waves, and this is a stupid question. Is it called a sneaker wave because it sneaks up, or a sneaker wave because you're wearing tennis shoes and it sneakers them?
I love this. It should be the second. I'm gonna vote from now on. It is the second one. No, it's because they sneak up. It's the Oregon coast. In recent years, we've had increasing problems because really they're just these outsized waves, and they really do come out of nowhere. I used to do environmental education, outdoor school for sixth graders on the Oregon coast, and so I'd have 150 kids on a beach, and it would be me and like 3 high school students and a 20-year-old.
Oh my God.
It's like my body is between you and the ocean at all times, and every so often you just get a wave that it goes all the way up into the shore pines, a quarter mile in, and it'll take everything out with it. We do lose people to it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
You can Google it. There are some great videos. Oregonians really like to stand too close to sneaker waves and video it, so it's all over YouTube. You can watch us be stupid.
I look forward to that.
Oh, someone found the Yahats marker. Good.
And thank you, everyone. This was wonderful. And if you enjoyed it as much as I did, let your bookstore know by ordering Ruby's book. Be in touch with your store with any suggestions for how this could be better, and order Ground Truth, a geological survey of a life from them. Thanks to Linda Marie and Nikki. And this is Wanda signing off.